There was a time when England had its own gods, gods of thunder, earth and sea, but now even their names have been forgotten. How did a land once filled with myth lose its very soul? Thousands of years ago, in the green forests and ancient hills of England, layers of deep mythology once thrived. Before the arrival of the Anglo-Saxons, the Germanic tribes who came to the island around the 5th century, the Celtic Britons had their own gods. Lugh, the god of light and skill, Brigid, the goddess of inspiration and healing, and Cernunnos, the god of nature and animals. These Celtic deities lived on mostly in the western regions, like Wales and Cornwall, where their rituals were deeply intertwined with nature and the cycles of life. Later, as the Anglo-Saxons settled in the east and center of the land, the myths of the two peoples began to merge, creating a strange and fascinating blend of earth and sky gods, a fusion of Germanic and local beliefs. During this era, the Anglo-Saxon people lived, their lives deeply intertwined with their powerful gods. Woden, the chief god, similar to Odin, ruled over all things, guiding humanity with his boundless wisdom. Thunor, the god of thunder, akin to Thor, wielded his mighty hammer to command the storms, and farmers prayed to him for gentle rains and fertile soil. Tiw, the god of war, granted courage to warriors. Udwile Frigg, Woden's wife, the mother goddess, and Freya, the goddess of love and fertility, filled life with affection and abundance. People lived in harmony with nature. They celebrated the seasons, and their rituals were part of everyday life. For example, during Beltane, the spring fire festival on May 1st, they gathered around great bonfires, drove their sheep through the flames for fertility, and danced and sang to honor their union with the earth. During Yule, the winter solstice festival, they used fire and warm feasts to drive away the darkness and await the return of the sun. These ceremonies were not merely acts of worship. They were ways of survival in a harsh world, where the cold winds and the yield of the land determined one's fate. But then the winds of change began to blow. In 597 AD, Saint Augustine, an Italian monk sent by the Pope, arrived in Kent, in southeastern England, with a band of missionaries. He persuaded King Ethelbert of Kent to convert to Christianity, and thousands followed his lead. Christianity swept across the land like a powerful tide, transforming everything in its path. In the south, the new faith spread quickly, but in the north, in the kingdom of Northumbria, the old beliefs still lingered. By the 7th century, monks and pagan warriors lived side by side, one chanting prayers, the other offering sacrifices to Woden, the ancient temples of the pagan. Gods were replaced by stone churches, and the old rituals were outlawed, condemned by the church as demonic. Yet in remote villages, people quietly kept their ancient faith alive. Mothers still whispered prayers to Freya for an easy childbirth, and farmers, during the dark nights of Yule, murmured stories of Thunor. The new religion promised salvation, but at the cost of the old god's silence. Then in 1066, the Norman conquest, the invasion of England by William the Conqueror. From France, struck like a storm, William and his Norman followers, a people of mixed French and Scandinavian descent, conquered England, and the Latin and French tongues came to dominate over English. The new aristocracy spoke French, and the local storytellers, the Scops, the Anglo-Saxon oral poets, vanished from the stage. The old oral legends, once passed down from generation to generation, were either forgotten or replaced by French and Christian tales. Norman monks who recorded history rewrote the ancient stories. Through the lens of Christianity, heroes became sinners in need of repentance. and the old gods were recast as banished demons. Only a few remnants, like Beowulf, the ancient Anglo-Saxon epic of a warrior who battles monsters, survived. Written in Old English, this poem preserved the echoes of old heroism and gods. But it was no longer part of people's daily lives, more like a buried treasure, accessible only to scholars. In the 16th century, the Reformation, King Henry, Bibby's movement to separate from the Catholic Church, delivered the final blow. Henry VIII founded the Church of England and declared many folk rituals, unchristian as even simple celebrations like Beltane, were suppressed. People were forced to hide their pagan beliefs, and folklore slowly faded away. Then in the 18th and 19th centuries, the Industrial Revolution transformed everything. People left their villages and flocked to crowded cities like Manchester and London to work in factories. With the passing of the Enclosure Acts, 18th century laws that privatized common lands, the fields that had belonged to rural communities for generations were taken away. People became separated from the land, and in losing touch with the soil, they lost touch with their myths as well. The green fields gave way to smoke and machinery, and old traditions, like storytelling by the fire, were forgotten. As the factory smoke rose into the sky, the songs of the forests fell silent. The spirit of England, once rooted in earth and stone, faded away like a light extinguished. But in the 20th century, a dreamer named J.R.R. Tolkien, an English writer, set out to restore the lost spirit. Tolkien, a professor of linguistics who loved Beowulf and Norse mythology, believed that a nation without its own myths had no soul. In one of his letters he wrote, "From the very beginning, I felt the poverty of my beloved country. It had no stories of its own. I wanted to make a body of more or less connected legend and dedicate it to England." The world of Middle-earth was his attempt to fill that void, to rebuild the spirit that had been lost centuries ago. Through The Lord of the Rings, his epic about the Ring of Power, Tolkien tried to create a new mythology for England. He didn't just write fantasy, he revived the forgotten gods of his homeland. Characters like Gandalf, the wise wizard, were inspired by Woden, and creatures like orcs and elves came from Beowulf and old Anglo-Saxon legends. Middle-earth became a bridge between England's pagan past and its modern age. Perhaps England's myths never truly died. They only slept in the soil, in the stones, and in the stories we whisper when no one is watching. What do you think? Does the old spirit still linger in this land? Share your thoughts, like and subscribe. Because myths never really fade. They're still alive beneath the earth.